For all of the mistakes of nationalist governments that we can point to, empire's far worse.
Nations try to do the same thing on a small scale that cosmopolitan empires do on a large scale.
There never was a more tolerant order of nations than the order that was created on the basis of this Protestant construction.
What the medieval popes and emperors wanted to see in the kind of Christian republic of Europe, you'll find that very often nationalists want to achieve that same kind of homogeneity within the boundaries of a nation or among the members of a nation state.
I don't think that an imperialist or internationalist principle can live in the same political environment with a principle of diversity and self-determination. If we can't say, 3 cheers for Britain, good luck with their independence, we feel for them. Just like we want to see Kurdish independence, we want to see Jewish independence in Israel, we want to see America independent. If we don't have the right to say that, I think we're lost.
The Tikva Fund and Mosaic Magazine present Nationalism and the Future of Western Freedom, a lecture based on the Mosaic article of the same title by Yoram Hazony. The program will consist of 3 parts: a lecture by Yoram Hazony, a response from Walter Russell Mead, and a conversation moderated by me, Jonathan Silver. As president of the Herzl Institute, Yoram Hazony advances research in Israeli history and Zionist thought, political theory, Jewish philosophy, and the intellectual and moral contributions of the Hebrew Bible. Dr. Hazony's most recent book is God and Politics in Esther, published in 2015 by Cambridge University Press. He's now at work on a book that elaborates themes from this Mosaic article and this discussion, his 5th book, about the political forms of empire and nation.
We're going to be talking about nationalism and the future of Western freedom. And as people know, nationalism used to be kind of a progressive, popular kind of, if you're a well-meaning person, then you supported nationalism. After World War II, that kind of changed. And today, to say that you're nationalist is almost like saying that you're a racist. In today's world, nationalism is rapidly becoming relevant again with the British vote for independence and with Donald Trump having put certain nationalist issues center stage in his campaign. And whether or not these particular developments end up having some kind of permanence, I think it's clear that the issues that are being raised of whether national independence and the national state should continue to be the basis for the political order, those issues are not going away. I think they're simply going to continue to become more and more relevant. There's all sorts of theoretical and historical and philosophical issues that we need to touch on. There's current events issues that we need to touch on. But first of all, I've got to respond to the people who've been posting about this on Facebook. And I have to tell you, I mean, I'm not a big fan of technology. I'm basically no good at it. But this is really something. This is something that my friends in Britain, who fought long and hard, some of them for many years, to achieve this remarkable moment, really a declaration of independence, a moment in which a nation declares its freedom. We don't know how the story is going to turn out, but there's this moment, this I don't know, to me, uplifting moment of a people standing up and saying, we want to take responsibility for our own future. We want to be free. And so I naively, thinking that this is just sort of a normal thing to do, I congratulated my British friends on their achievement on social media, and was immediately caught like in a thunderstorm by the hurricane winds of the sudden realization that I was once again, yet again, politically incorrect. And friends all over Europe and America and in Israel wrote, as though I just done something unspeakable. And in fact, that's what they said. Yoram, says one professor who's an old friend, and I respect him, I think it's unseemly at a time like this for you to be clinking glasses. For people saying, how could you possibly rejoice? And I said, what do you mean, how could you possibly? Have you ever heard of the 4th of July? Did you ever celebrate Israel Independence Day? I mean, isn't it a common thing in Western nations? I mean, the French even celebrate Bastille Day. I mean, haven't you heard of this before? They say, enough with these inappropriate historical parallels. It's not fitting. The times have changed. Well, see, I didn't know. I didn't know that the times have changed. I didn't know that freedom had ceased to be accepted among decent people. Now, of course, the point, the serious point that was being made was, at least explicitly, was, look, people's lives are in danger. The economy is in danger. Violence might ensue. Who knows what could happen? And I said, but who knew what could happen when the Americans declared independence, or the Dutch, or the Israelis, and or India, or I mean, we could just go on and on. Just look at the shift. Look at the change that's taken place among us. That it used to be that a decent person, right, a decent person looking at a people. Now, and by the way, you don't even have to. You could even be in conflict with a particular people and still respect and feel for them the moment of their declaration of independence. I think decent people used to just be able to do that as a natural human thing. But today it's not a natural human thing anymore. It's something appalling. It's something indecent. It's something inappropriate. It's something unseemly. Now, I think that's deeply wrong. I think it's deeply wrong. I don't think it's simply a change in the times. I think something terrible has happened. Something terrible has happened to us. And I want to try to understand a little bit why. What is this that's happened to us? Well, let's begin with what is this business of independence? Why did we used to clink glasses and ring church bells and have barbecues and fireworks and so what was that? What was that all about? Now it happens that this is an ancient question, this question of independence. Should a nation be independent? It's really the most fundamental question in political theory and political thought, which is it better for the world if somebody comes up with a universal set of laws and forces everybody to live in peace and harmony according to those laws. This goes all the way back to the very beginnings of the Bible, this question of should there be independent nations or would we be better off if we were ruled by empire? And today we have all sorts of archaeological evidence. We can easily read the inscriptions and the tablets of Egyptian pharaohs and Babylonian kings, and we know that empire, going back thousands and thousands of years, empire was always for the great variety of the human empires and their particular ideologies, each one different from the others. In a certain sense, they're all the same. They always make the same claim. The claim was that the gods had sent me, the king, Hammurabi, the famous Babylonian. The gods sent me, or the Assyrians, to unite the four corners of the world under a single regime of law. Why? Simple. So that needless warfare and hatred among men who should all be brothers can be eliminated. And so that we can focus our attention on creating one great economy, one great human effort to bring as much food, as much wealth, as much prosperity as possible to the world so that human beings should cease to starve. Right now, that's a noble aspiration, and I don't say that sarcastically. It's clearly a noble aspiration. And yet at the same time, we know from the Bible that this noble aspiration, this ideology of universal empire, was the ideological driving force that accompanied the will to rule the world, and that the brutality and the oppression of the universal theory as it bears down on each small people, well, it sort of depends. If you're looking at it from the palace of the emperor, then it looks like a noble aspiration. If you're looking at it from the perspective of the prophets of Israel, who are concerned that the Jewish people, for example, should be able to determine, to plot their own course, to have their own God, to understand right and wrong according to their own understanding, well, then this universal empire, well, it becomes Beit Avadim. It becomes the house of bondage. And the Hebrew Bible is born from this great political contest between two certainly noble claims. The one that we should eliminate all war and focus on grain, on economics, on all of us uniting to eliminate starvation, the imperial idea, and the national idea, that perhaps mankind would be better off and God would be happier with us as well if we allowed each nation to pursue its own course, allowed each people to be an experiment in what a human being can, in what a human society can be. Now, as we know, most of Western history has actually been dominated by this imperialist aspiration. Most of it. The imperial dream was the Roman dream, among others. And when Christianity took over the Roman Empire and became the official church, the idea of a Pax Romana, of a Roman law that would extend to every nation that could be reached in order to bring peace to the world, a Roman peace, that becomes a Christian dream, a Catholic dream. And for more than 1,000 years, Europe was governed, at least by this idea. I'm not saying that it was always executed. Often it wasn't. But the dream was there, and often it was applied. The popes, often allied successfully, or more so or less so, with the German Holy Roman emperors, they sought to create a universal Christian kingdom. And the Hebrew Bible never ever stopped causing trouble for this dream of universal Christian empire. So peoples, the French, the English, the Czechs, the Poles, long before the Reformation, we have cases of the formation of nations that were inspired by the Old Testament. French Catholicism modeled itself on the idea of the Davidic dynasty, that the French were the heirs to the Davidic kingdom. And so there always was, even within this Catholic universalism, a tendency towards nationalism, which entered through the Jewish Bible, through the Old Testament. When Protestantism comes around, it becomes central. The Protestants, first of all, they want the right to read the Bible their own way. But that's not just a religious doctrinal matter, it's a national matter. Because what it means is that different nationalities, different groups and traditions are demanding the right to read the Bible their own way. And reading the Bible your own way means the right to have your own constitution, the right to have your own self-government. The two things are directly tied. So the modern period is really born with the Protestants returning to the Hebrew Bible and to the national model of the Kingdom of Israel, which is an independent national state. This was the model on which the modern West was based. We can say that our freedoms are based on it. For people who think this was invented in America, read the Dutch Declaration of Independence from 1581. You'll wonder what happened to copyright laws. I mean, it's so similar, it's astonishing. But it's 200 years earlier. And the Dutch, the English, the Scottish, other peoples, they fight a war against universal Catholic empire in order to be able to determine their own constitutions, their own religions. The 30 Years' War is a war about what's the character of the international order. Will it be an imperial order with a single empire? Or will it allow freedom of peoples? Will peoples be able to be free? And so you have the French, who are Catholics, and the Dutch, who are Calvinists, and the Swedes, who are Lutherans, fighting against German and Spanish troops in order to create nations. That's the 30 Years' War. And Westphalia, the famous Peace of Westphalia, it creates a new order in Europe. I'll call it the Protestant construction of Europe. And what this does is it takes the principle of self-determination, which is drawn from the Old Testament, it's drawn from the political thought of the Dutch and of the English and of the Scots, and it reconstructs Europe along the lines of from now on there's going to be national freedom. Peoples will be able to determine for themselves what church we're going to have, what religion we're going to have, what constitution we're going to have, who's going to govern us. Will we be a republic? Will we be a kingdom? That's what independence means. That's what American independence is. That's what independence means. When we celebrate Independence Day in America or in Israel or elsewhere, independence means that there's such a thing as a people, and that one people may be different from another, and that it's a decent human thing to do, that it's the right thing to do, that it's something God wants us to do, to allow peoples to be free, to be able to set their own course, make their own mistakes. And maybe they'll do the right thing. And then if they're successful, then we can imitate them. You might have heard the word diversity. Diversity wasn't invented by today's political correctness mongers. Diversity was invented by the Protestant construction based on a biblical model, that the nations should be diverse because that's what God wants to see, mankind flourishing in diversity. Now, it's been, we had about 350 years that the Order of the West was built on this model. I don't pretend that it was ideal. What could be ideal? What human construct is ideal? There are many things that these European nation states did that I'm not interested in endorsing. They were real good at talking about self-determination in Europe, but when it came to Africa or Asia or the Americas, they didn't have a problem being colonialists and imperialists there. And you know what? For the Jews, it wasn't such hot shakes either. At the same time, I think that we have to be realistic. There never was a more tolerant order of nations than the order that was created on the basis of this Protestant construction that allowed each nation its own fate. There never was something that sparked an age like the modern age in which the free competition of nations in political theory and in theology and in science and in the arts created the world that we live in. Now, it's possible for that competition, for that rivalry, for that self-determination of each people, it's possible for that to disappear. We take it for granted. We think it's just some kind of natural thing, but the truth is mankind almost never had it in history. Almost never had it in history. And when we look at enterprises that are considered to be progressive and liberal today, I have in mind the European Union, whose leadership wants to erase the boundaries between nations, or international law, which is almost synonymous with goodness and light, unless you happen to be a nation like America or Israel that is outside of the consensus of what the international lawyers think ought to be happening, and then it starts to become a little bit oppressive. The United Nations, free immigration of peoples, free trade, it all sounds so good, and in some cases it's terrific. Some of these things have done great things, have done good things. But we should be careful. We need to be careful. We need to understand. The old Protestant construction, for 70 years, since World War II, it's been dying as a reaction to World War II and World War I, for good reasons and for bad reasons. That's the reality. The Protestant construction has been dying from the world. And what's replacing it is something we can call the liberal construction. And the liberal construction of the West is not something that exists yet. It's still a theory. But this theory says really there's only one principle on which political legitimacy is based, and that's individual freedom. And again, it's something that sounds beautiful. It sounds beautiful. What could be more wonderful than that the entire world should be based on individual freedom? But it turns out that when people keep reading and rereading the classics of liberal thought, and they think about, as let's say John Locke did, they reduce human beings to everybody is perfectly free and everybody's perfectly equal and everyone makes decisions on the basis of consent and government is only on the basis of consent. That's all beautiful. And Locke, by the way, he thought that he was just expounding Protestant principles. He didn't even know that he was doing something special. But today, hundreds of years later, when these principles, these beautiful principles, are taken, and they're taken and used as a weapon, time and time again, they're used as a weapon by liberals, liberals who say, look, how could you possibly, United States, how could you not be willing for your soldiers to be tried by the International Criminal Court? Liberalism says you must. Or the Jews were now told in various places in Europe again and again, how can you circumcise your children? It violates human freedoms. Or Christians who want to try to raise their children, to send them to schools or to run businesses according to the way that they understand the plain meaning of Scripture. And people say, don't you understand? You're violating liberalism. You're violating human rights. And the more this goes on, and now the Brits, you want to be independent? Don't you understand how you're endangering mankind? So in the name of good Lockean principles, well, it turns out that you can create an intolerant imperial mindset in which every one of us, Jews and Christians, British, Israelis, Americans, everyone is going to have to agree to a certain interpretation, the universal interpretation, whatever it is that is determined by international law, by the international courts. Now, I understand fully. I sympathize with my liberal friends. I understand that liberals do not understand that the advancing liberal construction is a form of imperialism. I understand that they don't get it. But when they say that a nation, the British, one of the oldest and finest nations that there are in terms of the contributions that it's made to political freedom, among other things, when the British say we've had enough and we don't consider Europe to be freedom and we would like our independence now, well, they respond, how do you say these days? In a deplorable fashion. They respond, this is unjust, this is intolerable, this is endangering the world, this is illegitimate. And did you notice how they kept saying it was illegitimate? Did you notice this? That the response, that I don't know how much you followed the press in Britain and abroad, this is illegitimate. They couldn't, I mean, it's only 52% of the vote, let's have another vote. or only the old supported it. The young were left out. What does the young were left out? It means that the young didn't vote. But no, but that makes it illegitimate. We have to do it again. No. England it's a parliamentary democracy. We can't make a decision on the basis of a referendum. It's not as though the people are sovereign or something. The parliament will have to decide. And people were calling for, we can find a way to negotiate our way out of this. I couldn't believe it. It was wall to wall. Everyone had some scheme for how you could make sure that this illegitimate vote was suppressed. Millions upon millions of people voting in a democratic process, but self-determination is just not a value anymore because liberalism is more important, and liberalism knows best. Now, I understand we're just at the beginning of this. It just doesn't look so horrible yet. But pay attention to this. Watch it carefully. Watch the way this outrage, people talk about, about these shaming campaigns on the campuses, the political correctness. Everybody's always writing about the campuses, how awful it is. You say the wrong thing and then everybody piles on you. Hundreds, thousands of people throw things at you. But it's not, pay careful attention to this, it's not the campuses anymore. The entire Western world is one big campus now. If a nation does the wrong thing, if a religion believes the wrong thing, if a person says the wrong thing, then there's a firing squad of thousands of people who are ready to oppress and suppress you and call you out and shame you. And I hope you all understand that this is reality now in this American election. I have friends, I hope you're not offended by this. I have friends, I actually do, real, actual flesh and blood people who, they're planning on voting for Donald Trump, but they don't dare to tell anybody on Facebook because they don't want to face the firing squad. And then people and then the journalists, all these journalists on the left and the right saying, well, there's no educated person who's come out in support of Trump. Well, it's true, but they're all underground. Now think about this. Think about where we've come to. Think about where we've reached and think about where we're going. Now, I don't say that, that Donald Trump doesn't deserve much of the criticism. But if your democracy doesn't allow anybody, you'll be pilloried, you'll be shamed, you'll be driven out of polite society if you support one of the two main parties. I hope you understand that your democracy is dead. If you can't support one of the two main parties in a democracy, then you don't have free elections anymore. Right? This could get very, very bad. And the further the liberal construction advances, eliminating the idea of self-determination, national self-determination, which is the principle of tolerance of other dissenting, very different views, the further we advance towards eliminating the principle that that Catholics will live in the same political international order with Protestants and monarchists with Republicans and free countries with less free countries. The further we advance, the further we advance towards an imperial tyranny of the kind that history has known. It sounds far-fetched, but pay attention to it. Do me a favor, do yourself a favor. Just notice how step by step, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom to express your opinion, notice how you yourself are ever more careful not to say what you think. It's happening to you. I know it is, because it's happening to me, and it's happening to my friends. I know it's happening to you as well. Maybe not on the same subjects, we don't agree on everything, but it's happening to you. You think twice, you think 3 times. Do you want to live in a society like this? I think that this is what's at issue. I think this is what's at issue. If we can't say 3 cheers for Britain, good luck with their independence, we feel for them. Just like we feel for the Kurds. We want to see Kurdish independence. We want to see Jewish independence in Israel. We want to see America independent. If we don't have the right to say that, I think we're lost. I think we're lost. So what we're talking about is a battle over the order, the nature of the civilization we live in. This is probably the most dramatic time that there has been since the Second World War. A battle over the fundamental order of the political world that we live in. Thank you all for listening. As the West, which was founded on the Bible, moves away from its commitment to biblical principles, to a moral minimum based on the 10 Commandments, to the idea of national independence and self-determination, as the West moves away from these things, I think that people will be surprised to see how quickly tyranny returns. Empire is not a tolerant form of government. And for all of the mistakes and excesses of nationalist governments that we can point to, empire is far worse. We may have forgotten that, but we'll be remembering it unfortunately, as the move towards a universal order advances. And this is something everybody needs to think about very carefully. What's the actual source of our freedoms? Are our freedoms, as people want us to believe, are our freedoms coming, from some kind of universal commitment to individual liberty? Is that really the source? I know many people think it is, but I think the source is actually in Scripture. And if we're willing to be open-minded enough to look at the actual historical evidence and the ideas and where they come from, I think we'll see that a return to biblical principles is what we need. The State of Israel is one of the classic national states that, it's escaped the effort of the European Union to integrate it, and Israelis want to have their independence. The State of Israel is more concerned about its unique Jewish character and its ability to defend itself according to its own determinations and to make constitutional and religious decisions independently. But Israel is certainly a leading player in the question of the national state and its future. And any move, as we see in Europe, away from the national state model, among other things, it casts Israel in a light of being an illegitimate country, which I should think would be troubling, not just to Jews, but to Christians and to others.
We have two alternatives, and they're both flawed. Both of them are capable of the most incredible, vile, ugly stuff. Nations try to do the same thing on a small scale that cosmopolitan empires do on a large scale. The tension one often sees in the Jewish community is not a way in which the Jewish family is sort of betraying its calling as a people that are to be a light to the world. This is actually an aspect of that in which Jews are living out this human condition of having two alternatives, neither of which really works, and yet among which we have to live.